The unlikely alliance between Buffalo Bill Cody and Sitting Bull remains one of the most complex and unexpected relationships in the history of the American West. This partnership, formed against the backdrop of American expansion, native resistance, and Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, culminated in a moment of historical tension, drama, and ultimately, tragedy. On November 24, 1890, Buffalo Bill Cody, celebrated for his exploits in the Pony Express, his service in the Civil War, and his role as an Army scout, arrived at New York Harbor after receiving urgent orders from General Nelson A. Miles, commander of U.S. Army troops stationed in South Dakota. These orders would set in motion a sequence of events that could have altered history. Miles directed Cody to travel immediately to Standing Rock in Dakota Territory, where a tense and potentially explosive situation was unfolding. His mission was clear: apprehend the legendary Lakota leader, Sitting Bull, and deliver him to the nearest U.S. military commander. This order thrust Buffalo Bill into the center of one of the most charged and dangerous moments in the history of U.S. and Native American relations. Buffalo Bill's involvement in this mission wasn't just another assignment, it was personal. Sitting Bull and Cody had developed an unusual bond, having worked together years earlier when Sitting Bull had joined Cody's Wild West show for 4 months in 1885. Their partnership had solidified a mutual respect, a bridge between two vastly different worlds. Cody, with his rugged frontiersman persona, and Sitting Bull, the defiant symbol of native resistance, found common ground on the stages of the Wild West show. This unusual alliance made Cody's new task of apprehending his former colleague and friend all the more poignant and emotionally fraught. As Cody made his way to Standing Rock, the timing of his arrival would prove critical. On December 15, 1890, mere days before Cody's anticipated intervention, Sitting Bull was killed in a violent confrontation with tribal police. This tragic event left the question hanging in the air: could Buffalo Bill have prevented Sitting Bull's death had he arrived just a few days earlier? Could his friendship with the Lakota leader have averted the bloodshed? Or would the tense circumstances have led to even more conflict, potentially putting Cody's life at risk as well? These questions lingered long after Sitting Bull's death and have haunted historians ever since. Overseeing Standing Rock during this turbulent period was Major James McLaughlin, an Indian agent who was deeply suspicious of Sitting Bull and his influence. McLaughlin viewed Sitting Bull not only as a threat to peace but as an obstacle to his broader mission of civilizing Native Americans by imposing white customs and values. He saw fear as his most effective tool in controlling the native population and used it liberally. McLaughlin had long sought to neutralize Sitting Bull, especially after the Lakota leader's pivotal role in the defeat of Custer's 7th Cavalry at the Battle of the Little Big Horn in 1876. For McLaughlin, Sitting Bull symbolized defiance, and he became a target for removal once he returned to Grand River after a brief stint in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Sitting Bull's advocacy for his people's rights and his refusal to bow to white authority further solidified McLaughlin's resolve to arrest him. Tensions came to a head with the rise of the Ghost Dance movement, a spiritual movement among native tribes that promised the return of their ancestors, the restoration of their lands, and the removal of white settlers. The Ghost Dance spread like wildfire among the Great Plains tribes, and McLaughlin, along with many other U.S. authorities, feared it could incite widespread rebellion. Sitting Bull, though not directly involved in the movement, was blamed for inspiring its fervor among the Lakota. McLaughlin, ever paranoid, saw Sitting Bull as a destabilizing force that needed to be removed before he could galvanize the Ghost Dance into a full-scale uprising. On November 17, Major McLaughlin, accompanied by interpreter Louis Primo, visited Sitting Bull's camp at Grand River to assess the situation firsthand. Upon their arrival, they found about 100 people gathered around a pole, singing and swaying, while another 100 looked on. Despite the eerie scene and the palpable tension, McLaughlin decided against intervening directly at that moment. Instead, he and Primo spent the night at the nearby home of Bullhead, an Indian police lieutenant and one of Sitting Bull's longtime adversaries. The following morning, McLaughlin returned to Sitting Bull's camp and found the Lakota chief emerging from a sweat bath. Sitting Bull appeared thin, subdued, and wrapped in a blanket against the morning cold. McLaughlin attempted once again to dissuade Sitting Bull from supporting the ghost dance, urging him to cease any involvement. However, Sitting Bull, ever defiant, suggested that McLaughlin visit the men who had experienced spiritual visions through the dance to dispel any lingering fears. McLaughlin, skeptical of Sitting Bull's intentions, dismissed this suggestion and instead instructed the chief to meet him the next morning at Fort Yates Reservation headquarters. Sitting Bull, sensing a trap, sent his friends in his place, further straining the fragile relationship between him and McLaughlin. This series of miscommunications and misunderstandings only heightened the tension. Some of the ghost dancers, fearing arrest or worse, fled to the Badlands, a remote and rugged region where Sitting Bull intended to join them, not to dance, but to talk. However, leaving the reservation required permission, and Sitting Bull, misunderstanding the formalities, sent McLaughlin a poorly translated note indicating his intention to go to Pine Ridge to meet with his comrades. McLaughlin misinterpreted this note as a veiled threat and, in response, ordered Sitting Bull confined to his cabin, effectively placing him under house arrest. It was at this crucial juncture that Buffalo Bill Cody was called upon to intervene. Fresh off a successful European tour with his Wild West show, Cody faced growing scrutiny from Congress and Indian rights advocates. The Wild West show, though wildly popular, had always been a point of contention, with some viewing it as an exploitative spectacle that commodified Native American culture. Others saw it as a platform where Native performers, like Sitting Bull, could showcase their heritage and tell their stories in their own way. Upon receiving General Miles' urgent telegram, Cody immediately enlisted the help of his trusted friends, Dr. Frank Powell, also known as White Beaver, Pony Bob Haslam, a legendary Pony Express rider, and Lieutenant G.W. Chadwick. The group arrived in Mandan, North Dakota, on Thanksgiving Day, November 27, 1890, ready to make their way to Standing Rock and prevent the situation from spiraling further out of control. Cody informed McLaughlin of their impending arrival and set out, despite numerous obstacles. However, Cody's intervention was not without its own complications. He arrived at Fort Yates in a drunken state, delaying his mission. After sobering up, he gathered supplies and set off once again, accompanied by newspaper reporters eager to document what promised to be a historic confrontation. Cody remained hopeful that his bond with Sitting Bull could prevent bloodshed. He reflected on their past, recalling, "My old enemy and later friend would heed my counsel." Yet, as he ventured deeper into Lakota territory, Cody faced growing uncertainty. He was heading into what many considered hostile territory, relying solely on the fragile trust he had built with Sitting Bull. Meanwhile, McLaughlin, ever distrustful of Cody's intentions, did everything in his power to thwart the famed showman's intervention. Through a series of calculated moves, McLaughlin redirected Cody's party away from Sitting Bull's camp, sending word via Louis Primo that Sitting Bull was not at home but instead on his way to Fort Yates. Cody, upon learning that President Benjamin Harrison had rescinded General Miles' order to apprehend Sitting Bull, returned to Fort Yates, defeated, and eventually departed for Mandan. While Cody's efforts were ultimately in vain, the knowledge that Buffalo Bill was seeking him must have weighed heavily on Sitting Bull's mind. Did the news of Cody's approach offer Sitting Bull a glimmer of hope amid the chaos and fear? Did he believe that Cody had come to offer him a return to the Wild West show, a chance at escape from the encroaching violence? Or did he understand that this would be their final chapter? In the end, Sitting Bull's defiance remained unshaken. When pressed by McLaughlin's forces to surrender, Sitting Bull refused, knowing that surrender meant certain arrest, and likely, death. On December 15, 1890, just weeks after Buffalo Bill's ill-fated attempt to reach him, Sitting Bull was killed during a confrontation with Indian police at Standing Rock. The tragic scene unfolded with grim finality, as Buffalo Bill's own gifted horse, trained to perform during gunfire, stood as a silent witness to the chief's violent end. Despite years of advocating for his people and his efforts to foster understanding through his partnership with Buffalo Bill, Sitting Bull's death marked the tragic culmination of his resistance. Buffalo Bill, too, was left to grapple with the question of what might have been, if only he had reached Standing Rock sooner, if only their unlikely alliance had held for just a few more days. the tragedy of Sitting Bull's death remains a poignant reminder of the violent collision between two cultures, where even friendship and respect could not avert the course of history.